Okay, so Trump. So Trump is over this last week. Trump is doing a lot of executive orders. There's like an executive order about um like stopping anti-Christian stuff. Now he's talking about like the U.S. taking over Gaza and
Mm-hmm.
pretty much displacing the Palestinians for a little bit so they can rebuild, then bringing them back is kind of the thought process. And we have thoughts essentially. So
We do.
it's, I think we talked about it a lot this week. It, on paper, it sounds cool. It's like, oh yeah, the U.S. They'll come in, we'll make a bunch of money by rebuilding it and do all that stuff, make it a hub, make it a place for commerce, make it a beautiful place, bring the Palestinians in. It's a win-win for everybody. Israel doesn't have to deal with it, and the U.S. can take over the whole, all of the issues, problems that might come of it. But a important thing that Trump says is like, oh, Israel just, I mean, not Israel, America will just keep it. And
Mm-hmm.
that is like red flags for us, especially because of our understanding of the end times and like the importance of Israel, the land of Israel, where that is God's land. God chose
Mm-hmm.
that place. God didn't give it to other people. God doesn't hand it out. God is the one who chose for it to be given to Israel. It's not something that can be purchased, not something that can be bought. It's Israel's land given to them by God. And so it's a dangerous thing to mess with that and think it's something that you can just purchase and not even just purchase, just be given and just take over. Even though it might sound like it's a safe thing to do, it's a dangerous thing to do. What were your thoughts?
I um. Well, I mean, I agree. Um, like I get the sentiment. Like, if the U.S. can, like, it's still Israel's, land or whatever, but the U.S. has control over it. Like, it becomes ours or whatever. But it's for like peacekeeping reasons or whatever. Like, I get the logic. I mean, someone had to do something. Um, but it kind of seems us possessing land in the Middle East kind of leans towards like possessing other land in the Middle East and then making it ours. And, do we head down the road of, rebuilding Babylon, that kind of stuff? And what does it mean for land that rightfully belongs to Israel, covenant land? Because
Mm-hmm.
and and it seems to have always been a disputed part of the land. I just looked up like what was the Gaza um, known for in biblical times. Part of the land occupied by the Canaanites and the mortal enemies of God. Later in the scriptures, Gaza is described as the base camp of the Philistines, who were constantly attacking and terrorizing the Jews of Israel. So there seems to be some sort of connection, spiritual connection with that land and the enemies of Israel attacking them, which I think is interesting. Um, so that's Old Testament. Let's see what it was known for when Jesus walking the earth. Um, Bronze Age. That's not what I want. Um, so in the Roman times, Gaza maintained its prosperity, receiving grants for several different emperors. Um, blah blah blah. Um, Well, it just seems to be a land of turmoil and disputing over. But we know that when Moses came over, like they displaced the Canaanites and all of them, and um, it was given to Israel. It says, according to biblical accounts, Gaza fell to Israelites' rule during the reign of King David in the early 11th century, when the when biblically postulated united monarchy split around 930 BC. The territory of the Philistines, including Gaza, became part of the kingdom of Judah. So it wasn't the northern kingdom, it was always part of Judah. Some
Mhm.
historians today believe that these stories about Israel and Judea's rule over the Philistia are not historical, but rather mythical. So they're trying to like erase history accounts of the fact that it was under um,
Israeli rule.
Israeli rule. Yeah. The prophet Amos and Zechariah are believed to have prophesied that Gaza would be deserted. Um, when Canaan fell to the Assyrians under Tiglath, okay, I can't pronounce that name. Anyways, and Sargon II around 730 BC, Gaza came under Assyrian rule. In the 7th century, it again came under Egyptian control, but during the Persian period, 6th to 4th century BC, it enjoyed a certain independence and flourished. Nebuchadnezzar was defeated by the Egyptian army under, I don't care about names. However, it was captured by Nebuchadnezzar during the second unsuccessful campaign to invade Egypt. Um, so Herod, let's see here. Gaza was granted to Herod the Great by Rome. So it looks like Herod set up camp there, where it formed a separate unit within his kingdom. Um, on the division of Herod's kingdom, it was placed under Syria after Herod's death in 4 BC. Augustus annexed it to the provision of Syria. So it seems like it's gotten passed around a lot.
Mhm.
It's been a place of contention. Um, Everybody wants it for some reason. I don't know.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Since if you even look through the Bible, Abraham, since he was told to go there, there was issues going into Israel. You had times where
yeah,
David obviously had issues. Moses had to take it over. Joshua had to take it over, and then Moses was led him to there throughout the judges, throughout pretty much throughout the Old Testament is the combat in Israel
yeah.
for the land of Israel.
During in the book of Acts, it's mentioned as being on the desert route from Jerusalem to Ethiopia, and it was along that route that that eunuch. Um, that's where Philip evangelized to the eunuch, and he was baptized in water along that route.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I don't know what's its significance specifically is, other than it was part of the land that Moses didn't conquer and was supposed to. It was unfinished business, and David took care of that.
Yeah, and he
But
didn't
it
even get as
seems
far as like the end times, like what God promised completely to Israel.
yeah.
So that's pretty much Israel is an important place. A lot of stuff's happening over there. We personally we constantly pray for Israel, constantly pray for Zion because that's what God told us to do.
Mhm.
And we don't want people to die. We want people to be saved. We want people to meet Jesus. But we understand like everything that happens in Israel is important and affects the end time scenario. Because the end time
Yeah.
scenario is centered on Israel. Jesus is coming back for Israel, coming back to rule from Jerusalem, to rule from Zion. When all the end time stuff plays out, Zion will be the highest mountain. It's like things are going to shift, things are going to change, but it's all centered around there. When the
Yeah.
millennium comes, for thousands of years, we will go to Jerusalem to worship the King there. So it's not something to play around with when you're dealing with the land of Israel, and it's definitely something that you
No.
need to go in with fear and trembling. And this is like one reason, slight tangent, but not a tangent, but this is why we don't believe in with the people who are like the church has replaced Israel. No, then it's not
Mhm.
happened. It's not in the scriptures. It's not happening. God cares about Israel. God is going to come back for Israel. A day will come where all Israel will be saved.
Yeah. And it kind of seems to and I agree with that completely. And it kind of seems to me from what I read, what is that anytime someone other than Israel ends up possessing that piece of land, trouble comes to Israel. And so I don't know, like I feel like it creates eventually creates an open door for Israel to be in harm's way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, and historically, everybody's for some reason wanted that land.
Yeah. Because it's on paper, it's a strategic land, especially back in those days where it was mostly just land routes everywhere.
Hmm.
It's like, especially like when you talk about the story of Daniel, where it talks about the kings of the north and kings of the south, and like all this stuff is all about those routes and those trade routes and stuff like that. And so it's definitely
Yeah.
it's always been a strategic area. And so that's why it makes sense on paper. It's a strategic place, and the U.S. getting a foothold there would be cool. But you don't play around with Israel. You don't want to get into that mix because that is the land of God, and it's not something you can take or mess with.
Yeah. We don't want to step in and have God end up striking us because we stepped out of line. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
That and there's something in my gut that says like this and the like it sounds really good on paper for Israel. Just like it sounded really good sometimes when they would be like, Egypt, can we have your chariots? But like in the end, it wasn't ever good for them.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's like one of those.
Yeah. 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 100%.
So
So
I don't know.
no matter what happens, we will be praying because we believe that we want the U.S., we want the president, we want our government to make the right decisions. We want Israel to make the right decisions. So we're going to just keep
Mhm.
praying that God guides them in this and they don't overstep their bounds because we feel like it's going to be a dangerous thing to mess with.
Yeah, for sure and for certain.
Boom.
Definitely something to commit to prayer and do a little more studying on. We may bring you more information about this in the weeks to come.
Yeah, especially because as this continues, because right at this point, it's just Trump made a statement. So we'll see how far it goes. But there's
Yeah.
definitely a lot going on now. And so obviously we don't want to be like a political podcast, but when things happen or that are connected to what we feel is important to preparing people for what the Lord wants to do and what is happening in the end times and the moving and changing, the shifting and stuff, we want to make sure we're talking about it.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.